Why, how, what? That's it. 3 things. Today we're gonna run through the why, as in, why do we run with the technique that we do? Why should our technique look like it does? Then we're gonna look at the how, as in, how can we spot some maybe technical issues in our running that could be leading us on the path to injury? And then what are we gonna do about it? How do we actually fix that problem? It is so easy, even my nan could do it. That's actually a lie. She's 93 and bless her, she just keeps telling me about a greyhound she had when she was a young girl, but I love her. Shout out to all the nans. Here's the thing, I think if we're going to be lifelong runners, we've got to accept that injury is probably going to also be part of the journey. But there are injuries you can't do much about, and injuries you can do your best to avoid with a little knowledge and understanding. So let's focus on those ones. So phase 1, what I'm going to do is take you out for a run with me and Mary on a Saturday morning while we're training for New York, and talk you through the first phase, I guess, of this video. What we're trying to aim for is teaching you about the technique of running, as in, why do we run like we run? What's the point of it? It's really warm. By the way, we are now officially 4 weeks out from New York Marathon, which is absolutely mental. Oh my God, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it's crazy. We've only got 1 big week left. I'm so excited about the day.
I'm so glad. I'll be glad when the training will be over.
Yeah.
So the way I like to think about running, theory that is that you can put it into about 3 subcategories. The reasons we run like we do to make sure we're not injured and make sure we're going as fast as we can. Part 1, I'd say, of the run theory aspect is that everything you do in your running, it wants to be driving you forwards. So anything that is counterproductive, anything that takes away from that forward motion, you need to look at and make sure you get rid of for a very good reason. And you might think, well, hold up, everything when you go running goes forwards. Of course it does, but there are things in your body, could be these things. I'm just gonna interrupt Mary while she's running. Could be these things, could be anything that actually doesn't contribute to you going forward. And then your body has to make it a fight rather than a nice, what we would maybe call dance, where it's everything in the same direction. And actually sprinters are the best example of this in terms of runners, that when you have at the top end less than 10 seconds to get from point A to point B, you need to eradicate anything that takes you sideways or backwards and just focus on everything that drives you forwards. Part 2 of run technique that Mary's demonstrating nicely here is that you have to run in a way where you absorb the impact of every footfall. So every time your foot hits the ground, you're aiming to work out your technique in the best way to absorb that impact. Let's take the knee for a classic example. Knee, Mary's knee, my knee. Set up so that when you land, boom, here, all the shock has to be absorbed in here. Okay, so if you're lined up wrong, then the shock is not absorbed. If you're lined up right when you're running, then the shock is absorbed. We'll go on to that a little bit more in a minute, but you want to be lining your body up so that there is very minimal shock kind of not absorbed. All right, let's go back into the other part. Ready? Where are you going? Going across. Mary's getting lost. That doesn't bode well for New York. Going the wrong way. Whoa. The river is high now, gonna flood anytime soon. But the third point of the run theory jigsaw puzzle, once you've got past everything has to move you forwards and everything has to be about cushioning the impact, you then need to think about how do you reduce the strain and stress on the running muscles while they're running, because what you want is for all of those muscles that are propelling you forwards to stay as fresh as possible so that you can do it for longer. Because what will happen is one of 2 things. You'll run, your muscles will get tired, or one particular muscle might get more tired, and then eventually it might just give up and get injured. You'll aggravate it. Or the other thing that can happen is a different muscle takes over and tries to do that work because that muscle's tired, but then that gets injured because that gets tired. So you're looking at how can you be most efficiently moving forwards and reducing the strain on the muscles and absorbing the impact. All right, now stage 2 is all about identifying the issues. And before we get to work on it, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this over and over again in the video, but if you are not picking up injuries with your running, then it doesn't matter what people say about your technique. If they say, oh, you might want to tweak this, might want to tweak that, you don't have a bad technique. I'm just talking about the times that you might pick up an overuse injury. That's when you might be at the point when you're thinking, what am I doing? What needs correction? And the easiest way for me to explain is to show. And the first one is all about what type of things do we do with our technique that stop us moving forwards. And just while we get up to speed, I like to think of it like this. Imagine that there is a line that cuts you in half all the way down the middle, could even be put on the treadmill here. All you're looking at really when you're running is to make sure that no parts of your body cross this imaginary middle line. So look at my hands right now, I'm running and there's a middle line I'll probably put in front of me now, and they're not crossing, but look at that. This causes rotation. This is making my body go side to side and have to adapt instead of being able to run forwards. And likewise with the feet, are my feet crossing the imaginary middle line in the middle? If so, they're causing me to rotate rather than move forwards. This is just one really easy one to look at straight away. Rotation is the root of all evil. Quick story. When I was training for the London Marathon, my hand was actually facing backwards instead of facing sideways when I was running, and it was leading to me over-rotating with my left shoulder, compensating by coming across with my right shoulder, putting pressure on my hip, and it actually gave me a hip injury from just having a hand face backwards instead of sideways, and that is how powerful the kinetic chain is. So once we've made sure we've eliminated rotation, we've made ourselves go forwards, now we've got to think about our joints. How can we make sure that we're cushioning them and absorbing the impact as best possible? And the two things we need to look at for this part, I think, are overstriding and heel striking. Usually they go hand in hand, but not always. I'm going to try and intentionally overstride just to make the point, but essentially you want all the impact from downforce to be absorbed upwards in as neutral a position as possible. Overstriding is when you're landing in front. And then hot on the heels of overstriding is heel striking, and that's when you land heel first. And heel striking has been demonized in recent years, and yeah, it's not advised, but it's not in of itself a bad technique, because if you do it but you remain injury free, then what's the issue? The reason it's got potential to have a negative impact on your running is because once again you're not landing in a neutral position, so you're not absorbing the shock as well as you could do, and that puts strain on muscles and joints, and that strain is much reduced if you land neutrally, which is in the middle of your foot. Now the final part of the puzzle when it comes to looking at technique is how do we reduce the strain on the muscles? How do we reduce the wear and tear to keep them fresher for longer, especially if you're running longer distances? And I think really we're going to focus on the heel lift. A lot of runners run with a shuffle style technique that I'm trying to show you here, which is predominantly straight leg, and that puts a lot of strain on the hip to pull the whole leg's weight through. But by simply focusing on lifting the heel, we're going to use the glutes and the hamstrings a little bit more, which is good because they're meant for hard work, and we're going to relieve the hip a little bit by creating less of a lever. So instead of the strain of swinging a whole leg's weight through, we're swinging half the leg's weight as it's bent at the knee. Much less strain on the smaller hip muscles and more balance across the leg. Look at these top runners, it is a thing of beauty. They are so efficient and balanced. And finally, again, when it comes to reducing wear and tear on the muscles while you're working, it's as simple as thinking when you're running, is your body shape, if I'm side on here, do I have a slight forward lean in the trunk? Because look what happens if I lean forwards. I go forwards, so my momentum is already going that way. It's like putting your foot on the accelerator in a car, whereas if you're running and you're either leaning back, which that looks weird, but even leaning back or even completely straight upright, it's more the equivalent of putting the brakes on. So when you run, let's look at that, what it looks like on a treadmill. Forward lean, momentum taking you forwards, rather than looking at that. Look, that feels like I'm putting the brakes on straight away if I'm trying to run upright. Absolutely the momentum then carries you forwards. But what do you do when you've got all of this information? You now understand the theory of running and why we run like we run, and you now understand how injuries can happen, like what you need to look at if you're getting overuse injuries. And remember, let's be clear, if you're getting injuries, if you are running consistently and you're not getting injured, then your technique is not bad. It's that simple. But if you are picking up injuries and you have determined there is something that might be a technical flaw in the way that you run and you want to fix it, then again, 3-step process. Always about the threes in this video today. And number one is find the drills that will work on the technique issue you want to improve. And I've made a completely different video about this, so I'm going to link it here because I'm not going to go back over it. It's just easier for you to watch that video as well. But there is a drill that you can do before you run that's going to help each part of your technique. And part two of fixing the fault is simple, but again, you've got to understand the theory behind it first. And that is, anything that you do, if you want to change a technique, your brain needs time to adapt to that new technique. You can't just change it and it happens. So they say it's somewhere around 100,000 steps should teach your brain that the new way that you're moving is the way that you want to move, and then it becomes automatic. You don't have to think about it. But you do have to think about it in the early days. So how do you put it into your running? Well, I did it in a very simple way, as did Mary. We treated it like an interval session. On our easy runs, we would go out and we would run for, let's say, out of 5 minutes, we'd focus for 1 minute at first on the new technique that we wanted to implement. Just 1 minute, because it really is tiring. Like, it knackers you out while you're running. And then for the other 4 minutes, we just relaxed and ran easy. And then we repeat another 1 minute of focus, 4 minutes relax, for however long our easy run is. And over the days and weeks and months, we would build up like intervals. We would suddenly do 2 minutes and then 3 minutes of relaxing, or we would do 3 minutes of concentrating on the run technique and 2 minutes of relaxing as you go through the stages. And eventually your body has switched over to the new pattern. It just goes, oh, that's how we're moving now. And that is how you alter your technique, hopefully, to avoid your injury. But there is a part 3. And finally, you need to strengthen your muscles. We all know that stronger muscles mean more resilient muscles, that stronger muscles, they mean that you can run for longer or faster. So we're gonna have to go through a process of strength and conditioning, and it doesn't have to be heavy weights, by the way. It can very easily be core work. It could very easily be resistance band work. It does not have to be going to the gym and lifting really heavy things. Although, again, there is a place for that in training. And again, rather than go over it again in this video, I'm going to link you to a video about bulletproofing your running so that you can become a stronger runner. And these are the 5 exercises that are going to hit on all the different parts of your body that you need to look at whilst you're running. But ignoring strength and conditioning is absolutely opening yourself up to potential injury from overuse in your running. Come on, do me a deal here. If you learned something new in this video, consider subscribing to the channel. That's fair, I think, but I'm not going to push it. And if you like the video though, you are definitely going to like this one, which is the top 5 exercises that are going to bulletproof your running when it comes to strength and conditioning. Thanks for watching. See you next Sunday.